Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Read with Rhys book club discussion. Today, we will be talking about The Marked Princess by E.P. Stavs. I'm Nikki Rhys, and I have my friend Inez here today with us. And as you can see, we've got our tiaras on for the very special occasion to honor Princess Jocelyn from the book.
Yes, and I was looking for cat ears, but all I could find was a cat tail.
Isn't that what we could call the book? A cat tale? It's
A
a
cat
story about a
tail, a
cat.
tail of cats. It's
Yes.
technically a lion tail, so
I'm not gonna judge. So a quick summary of the book is we have this Princess Jocelyn, who is coming up on her 18th birthday, and her dad is making her choose a fiance, and it's a bit of a sticky situation because there's a guard that she's known for a long time that she has feelings for, and the other person in this love triangle mix is her childhood best friend, who is one of the nobles in their society, and then there's another kingdom that is making moves against theirs, and the main character ends up having to fight for her life and try and save her kingdom from this very grave threat. Um, and I want to start out by discussing the characters. What did you think about our main character?
uh okay. Well, I think that I definitely got off on the wrong foot with Jocelyn because in the first chapter, she's in the tree with her
Edmund?
friend. Oh, is it Edmund?
Uh-huh.
And then, she needs to get out of the tree and she jumps down and everyone tries to help her and she's like, I don't need no man. And at that moment I was like, oh my God. I can't with this. I mean, um at that point I was so tempted to just be like, nope, I can't, I'm done. But obviously we're doing it for the reading club. Um, so I persevered, and I think I wouldn't say she was my favorite character. I think that it was definitely too heavy in the category of the girl boss, warrior princess
Uh-huh.
vibe for me,
To be fair, though, I think
just
that is what it was
personally.
going for, and I think that it did do what it was trying to do.
Yeah, so I give the author points because it was very. Yeah, I think it was very much that's what she was trying to do, and then she achieved it. And
Uh-huh.
I felt that it was very forward, like, it's not like she was trying to do something else and then that happened, or
Uh-huh.
she was trying to do that and then ended up somewhere else. Like, basically what she was trying to do, she achieved. So
Mhm.
I get points for that, but for me, yeah, I was just that first I don't need no man moment. I was just like, "Nope,
Uh,
nope." But I
I
also get that that's very much, like a YA
Yeah,
girl
it's a very
boss
YA
trope.
thing, yeah.
It's a very YA thing to do. So I can't really come down too hard on this
Yeah.
particular book or this particular author for doing
Yeah.
that. And then by the end, I liked the story, and like I said, I just read through it and I was really happy with the
I
story. Like, I had fun.
uh,
Um, but it was just that first moment where I was like, no,
yeah.
no, no, no.
The the thing that kinda got me at the beginning was, like, it just seems kinda childish, them, like, sitting in that tree and stuff, and then, transitioning away from that, but, like, thinking back on it a little bit more, I think that it's kind of nice that it starts that way in a sense where I feel like the book does a good job of, like, this is kind of Jocelyn, like, growing up, and so we get to see her, even though she's still the same age, like, kind of sitting in those more youthful activities and, like, that mindset, and then having to grow up so much over the story because of all the things that happened to her. So I think that that is kind of a nice, uh, showing of growth for her. And I will say about Alex, the first time that he appeared, for some reason I didn't pick up on the fact that he was like around the same age. Like I thought he was
I
like
thought
some
so
older
too. I
guy,
thought he
and I
was
was just like,
older, yeah.
and then when it got more clear, I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense.
I actually thought from the beginning, I thought that Alex, yeah, was an older character, was going to be more a mentor or protector or something,
Uh huh.
and that, something along those lines, and maybe he would die and then she'd have to fend for herself or something, like more a
Uh
father figure type. I didn't realize that he was the love interest either, and
huh.
I thought the triangle was going to be Edmund, and then when the bad guy came,
Uh huh.
Stefan, I think?
Uh huh.
When he showed up, I thought he was going to be the bad boy love interest,
Uh huh.
and I was like,
And
"This
then
is
he just
going
ended
on
up
my
being the bad
trope
boy.
YA trope bingo board." I was like, "A bad boy love interest, let's get that started," and then he just was, he wasn't. He was just a villain.
Yeah. Um. So how did you feel about like the love triangle? We'll talk about it a little bit more later, but just kind of to get things going there.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's very much a YA trope is the love triangle. I don't hate the love triangle, actually. I think it can be I think it can be a really I think it's overused. But I think the
Mhm.
reason why it's overused is that it's so useful for showing that character
Mhm.
growth.
Uh-huh.
Usually the main character has to choose the it kind of demonstrates her choice,
Uh-huh.
like maybe,
Uh-huh.
Katniss in the Hunger Games has to
Mhm.
choose, this guy that she's always
Mhm.
loved and then or, like, had feelings for, and then this new guy that has these different traits,
Uh-huh.
and she has to kinda choose between them, and the choice she makes showcases her growth. So I
Yeah,
see
and
why they're
the
used.
uh, yeah, and that choice, especially I think Hunger Games is such a good example because that's a perfect case where the love triangle represents something deeper than just, oh, who am I gonna pick? It's about
Yeah,
who the love interests represent to her, and her choosing, what she wants for herself. So Gale is kind of more the reactionary, more militaristic in mind, and that causes him to make
mhm.
choices that end up hurting Katniss. Whereas with Peta, he kind of represents hope and trying to stay true to yourself, um and that all those moments in the book, and so her picking him, is symbolic for the overall story.
Yeah,
But yeah, I
definitely.
I did kind of have a little bit of trouble with this one because like it was so obvious to me who she was going to pick, and I was like shipping that, but like um the side character got, Edmund, he got like so much screen time, so to speak, in the book. Like and I think that's because I've read ahead. I've read like the next few books in the series. And he gets more play later on in the series, so that makes sense. But when you're reading the book, you're like kind of confused, I think. At least I was. Because there's times when like he seems like a really good love interest, and other times when like, oh, I'm not sure about this guy. He kind of rubbed me the wrong way a few times.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, I think that I kind of like that he was not portrayed too badly, though.
Yeah, I agree.
That maybe he had some flaws and things like that, where I think it was pretty obvious that Alex was the right choice from the beginning.
Yeah.
And I don't think, and I, yeah, but I don't think there was like, sometimes I think when writers set up a love triangle, then to get out of it, or they're like stuck because they're
Yeah.
both really good
You're like,
choices, and to get out
yeah.
of it, they're like, actually, this guy is,
Uh-huh.
really horrible. Like, actually, he kills kittens or something. And it's just like,
I'm glad that you
it
didn't
just
do
feels
that,
like,
yeah.
yeah, it feels lazy. Whereas I feel
Uh-huh.
because Edmund didn't do anything wrong and
Uh-huh.
necessarily, maybe he wasn't as likable as Alex, but he still didn't do anything notably wrong where it was like, "Oh,
Mhm.
okay, get rid of him." It was
Yeah, and that's
it
also
felt like a
nice.
real choice.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say, yeah, it does make it feel more like a choice for Jocelyn. Um, and, there were some moments when, he was really enjoyable too, like, just kind of a fun extra dynamic. Um, and, how did you feel about, agency in the book? Oh, I think you froze. Are you there, Inez? Well, we lost Inez for now. I'm sure she's working to get back. Um, but the next thing that I wanted to talk about was agency. And I think that kind of touches on what Inez and I were talking about when it comes to the love triangle is it does feel like Jocelyn had that kind of agency to make decisions for what to do and how to react to everything, which was really enjoyable in the story. Um, and but the other characters also had agency in how they handled things. Um,
Hello.
Hi, you're back.
Sorry, yeah. I got so offended about something. Had to leave. And then had to walk away.
So next, I want to talk about structure and pacing. In the book, there's a lot of flashbacks, and there's multiple point of views. Do you feel about all of that as you're reading? Oh, you froze again.
I know. I
There you
think
are.
it's my Wi-Fi.
Yeah, it
Okay.
happens.
Okay. Pacing.
Do you want me to repeat myself?
I just said that all I heard was that we're talking about pacing, and you did say something about flashbacks. So there were a lot of them, which I agree with.
Yeah, there's flashbacks throughout, and there's also multiple point of views in the book. Um, so I'm just curious how you reacted to that as you're reading.
Yeah, I think, well, one thing is I have kind of two brains. So I have one brain that's the reader brain, which has now been overshadowed by the writer brain. And
Uh,
the writer brain is very much the rules of the conventions is that you should not have so many different POVs,
mm,
that you shouldn't be jumping around so much. But then when I was reading it, I didn't think it was that big of an issue. I think
mm,
I do see the reason why writers say don't do that is because it can kind of show lazy writing, because
mm,
instead of showing the plot unfolding in a natural way through your main character, you just show the villain's point of view and you say, okay, this is what's happening. This is what the villain's thinking, instead of showing what the villain's doing through the
mm,
MC's journey, which is a lot harder. Then you just
mm,
like cut over and you're like, okay, this is actually what the villain's plotting. Here it is in a scene. So I think that's why they say don't do that. That's why the
mm,
advice is not to do that. But when I was reading, I didn't feel it was that it didn't offend my sensibilities. It didn't stop
mm,
me from enjoying it.
mm,
I almost felt like, as it was YA, and it's like you're reading through these stories very quickly, and I feel with YA it's a lot more like on the nose. They're not going for subtlety because it's written for teenagers, right?
yeah.
Teenagers are not subtle. So it's
Uh,
not going for like a subtle play on the theme or something. It's just like,
uh,
you know, do you Jocelyn's a girl boss queen. How do you know? She literally says it in the first chapter. I don't
yeah.
need no man. Like, she literally spells it out for you. So you don't need to interpret too much. You already know. And then I think
Uh,
in that actually works in YA, because YA is YA. That's the genre you're reading. When you pick
uh,
up YA, you're not like, oh, I want to be on our side. Wi-Fi.
Kelly's here. Hi,
Yeah.
Kelly.
Okay, we've got
Uh,
one person.
yeah.
Hi Kelly. Yeah, so that's what I kind of feel is it worked
Mm,
for me, and then also the flashbacks, and I think stuff did add some depth
mm,
without dragging the pacing. 'Cause,
Uh-huh.
with YA, you have to get that pacing of this thing happened, this thing's happened, this thing's happened, and
Mhm.
then if you actually have to build up that romance, it could take a
Mhm.
really long time, but if you just flash back, it's a lot
Uh-huh.
faster, so I was actually
Especially
okay with
because,
it. I
like
don't know, how did you
yeah.
feel?
I liked it. I the pacing is really fast in the book, and so, um, I mean, it's just so easy to, like, burn through the pages, like, it's such, like, a, quick read, because you just keep going, 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 but part of me kinda wanted it to be a little bit of a longer book because I did like it so much, and I felt like there was room for maybe a little bit more, um, space to expand things, but that, again, may have, like, hampered the pacing if it was a little bit of a longer book, but
Mhm.
I liked the flashbacks because, the 2 characters, they already have history together, and so that's was a really, like, efficient way of, like, showing us what that history is without, like, starting too early in the plot.
Yeah.
And, when it came to, like, the multiple, POVs, part of me I really like in books when you kind of have to read between the lines to try and guess what the bad guys are up to, and you kinda have to, like, get who's the person at fault, who's, um what's their plan, all of that. So for that reason, like, it was maybe not ideal for me as a reader, but I did really enjoy the scenes that were the bad guys plotting and stuff. I thought that it was really sinister, and there were still places where you had to, like, question, who's this person who's showing up and, trying to make this happen. So I think that I had kind of a mixed reaction, but overall I really liked it.
Yeah, exactly. I think overall I liked it, and I also am trying to see it through the lens of YA, like,
Yeah.
because it was
Mhm.
clearly trying to be YA, and then it
Uh-huh.
succeeded at being YA, so you can't really criticize
Yeah.
it for being YA, and I
Yeah.
think that, it'd be like criticizing middle grade for being middle grade.
Uh,
It's written in for a certain age group, and it's written in that style, and I think that I don't know, for me as a writer, I think one thing that I think is really good is that if you set out to do something and then you actually achieve it, you get a lot of points for that because sometimes you can accidentally fall into things or whatever, or your
uh,
plot is going to go this way and it ends up being that way, and it's hard. But I think you get points if you achieve if you have a really clear goal and then you achieve what you set out to do. So I give the author a lot of points for that. And I think that if I were a pure YA reader, this would definitely have a place on my shelf with
mhm.
my other YA books. But then but I'm also an adult who's looking at it and being like, "Oh, okay, you don't need to hold our hands that much, you
Uh-huh.
know?" Um,
Um, I
yeah.
don't have the physical copy of the book 'cause I like to read on my Kindle, but
Yeah,
the
same.
covers of these books, in this series are so pretty. Just very, like, colorful and moody without being busy.
Yeah. I actually haven't seen I also got the Kindle version. I only saw the cover of Marked Princess. I haven't seen the rest of the series.
It's
So,
all pretty much in the same style, it's very cohesive, just in, like, different, like, color splashes and muted details underneath of it. It's very, like, subtle but really pretty.
nice.
Yeah. How did you feel about the politics? Because we have, basically 5, I think, is it 5? Yeah, 5 kingdoms, on the map, um, and, um and all the kingdoms are there's a few that we know more about than others, like the main one, and then the antagonist country. But how did you feel about all of that? How those dynamics work and the
I
conflict?
actually, until you said that right now, I didn't realize that there were 5.
Yeah.
I will say that in that vein, I would say they weren't super memorable, and I
Uh-huh.
also felt that Jocelyn's Kingdom, which I now can't remember the name of, um,
I
was
think it's Eldor.
very Eldor. It was very kind of standard fantasy world
Mm.
for me, kind of medieval-ish,
Uh-huh.
swords and stuff like that, and kings and queens. So like, I would not put that in a category of something that I thought was if someone was looking for good world building, I would not point them in the direction of this book.
Uh,
But I think that, like I said, with YA, it has to be this faster pace, and we're more interested in the
more easily
characters.
understandable and easier to digest and all
Yeah.
that, yeah.
Yeah, and it was really easy to digest. I didn't have any questions or anything. I wasn't like, "Oh, that's confusing." I never had a point where I was confused or had to think about it. It just kind of, yeah, it was just easy to digest. I could just swallow it really quickly. But I will say that it wasn't the world building just wasn't I don't think that it was I don't wanna come
Uh,
down too hard on it because, again, it's, I think, written in a specific YA style,
mm,
but I just didn't think it was anything special.
uh, um, something that I enjoyed was the fact that even though there does seem to be, like, a magical threat looming, that Oh, you froze. Are Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah, I can hear
Okay.
you.
Um, I liked that, the primary conflict in this particular book was political. I really do enjoy a fantasy book where, um, there's both political and magical stuff happening, because I feel like it makes it feel more real to, like, human history, and also adds more dynamic to the story than just, "Oh, we're this is a story just about magic." Um, and, uh, speaking of magic, how did you feel about, the, the, Shendry stuff that comes out in the book with, the wildcat and all of that?
I mean, I think it was also kind of like the world building where I didn't have any questions. Everything was clear. I could easily follow it, could easily
Mhm.
digest it very quickly, but I wouldn't say, "Wow, that was amazing." Like, it wasn't like, "Oh,
Uh,
this is a really creative concept." Um, or it's something I've never heard of
uh,
before. So yeah, I guess it's kind of in that category of um, not being really standout amazing, but is also there's almost kind of a beauty in the simplicity of just,
yeah.
there's not all these different types of magic. There's not all this, I don't know, whenever you have a lot of magic people in your society, you have to suddenly explain why, like, how they fit into that society and why they
Yeah.
don't just solve all the problems.
And it's clearly explained why she has this power, which is,
Yeah.
it's not like this, like, "Why does she have the powers? That's weird."
Yeah, she's not just
It
a
makes
special
sense. Yeah.
snowflake. There's this kind of passing
Political
down of the
reason, yeah.
powers. And then I also like they set up that there's 5 of them, I think,
Uh-huh.
that have these,
Yeah.
special powers. So you're not wondering, like, does everybody have this? Or
Yeah.
are we gonna turn around, there's gonna be 20 people who have it? And and you also know that she's not the only one, there's others. So you kind of got this sense, I don't know, it was very clear, I think, and you can
Uh-huh.
also see the plan for the series is that she has these 5 Shendry
Uh-huh.
characters that are gonna continue the series, so I think that clarity is really good, so it didn't blow me away. I wouldn't say it's super creative, "Wow, I've never seen anything like this." It's gonna have me thinking about it or wanting to live in this world in my head for months afterwards, but easy to digest,
Mhm.
clear, and points to her for having the clarity and the ease of explanation. I think that's
Mhm.
actually more difficult to do than a lot of people
Uh-huh.
realize.
And having read a few of these books, already, I really like how their, like, spirit creature that they have, relates really strongly to their personality. Like, I feel like the wildcat makes sense with Jocelyn's personality, and I'd say the same of, Lily and her, creature, which is a bird. I think that the matching, uh, makes sense, and it feels really natural. Um,
Yeah, and I like when the magic kinda complements the personality of the
mm,
character, because I'm not also not a big person that I'm going to read a book just for the magic
uh-huh,
system. Maybe there's a few standout, magic systems that are really cool. But for the most part, I read more for the character.
Mm,
And so if the magic complements the character or complements the journey they're on or the story, then that's when I like the magic and I get more invested in the
mhm.
magic, I think.
Yeah. So next I want to talk about all the tropes that are going on in the book. It's as a YA book, there's a lot of tropes. And so it was kind of fun skimming through the book um today and yesterday trying to find like all the tropes that were there. It's kind of like, playing bingo.
Yeah.
Um, one that I thought was kind of funny was um that trope where everyone knows that you have a crush on somebody, and then you find out that everybody knows, and you're like embarrassed about it.
Yeah.
Um, and the book says Jocelyn stared at the endless array of stars winking their lights at her as though they too knew about her secrets. Thought that was really cute.
Yeah,
Um,
good one.
we also have the duty versus love conflict in the love triangle where um Alex in another trope, Jocelyn's parent, her dad interferes in the romantic relationship, which is a trope, and because of that, Alex's duty makes him separate himself from Jocelyn, um and so the book says he wore his duty like a shield, talking about he's shielding against his emotions and stuff. So I thought that was really like on point how that was worded. I really liked that.
Yeah.
um what other tropes did you notice?
Well, I think those ones are good ones that you picked out. I only noticed I actually wrote them down. Let me see. I We already talked about the sassy MC who don't need no man. Um, which yeah, that was obviously at the beginning, and then of course the love triangle where obviously the main character is at the center of it because I think in YA it's also very specific. It's not just a love triangle. It's
Uh-huh.
the main character has to be at the center.
uh
So it's not like she's like fighting with another girl for the attention. It's like she has all the attention. Because I think that's very like teenager fantasy. I mean, why not? And then the next one I noticed was the, sexy ripping of the clothes. So when they're in the, forest, Jocelyn, she gets caught in the bushes because her skirt is too long, and then she has to rip it in a very sexy way. And then, I don't know, Jocelyn's bleeding, and then Alex has to take off his shirt, and he has to be shirtless for a few chapters. So, I don't know if that's strictly YA. I feel it's YA because I do remember seeing it in, the Twilight series. There's definitely a scene, at least in the film, where, the wolf guy pulls off
uh
his shirt to, yeah, save the main character. So, it was very similar to that. But it could also be a romance trope, so because I think this falls kinda in the middle of, YA and also has some romance things. And
uh
then the other one I was going to put, but then I was so disappointed when it didn't happen, was the bad boy. Um, so if that was on my bingo board, I wouldn't get to cross it off, but I
Oh,
think
that
that would
that trope
be
is in
on
the
there.
second book.
Okay. Oh, okay, now I have to read the second book.
The
Gotta get
second book
my
is
fill of bad boy tropes.
the second book is about Lily finding out more about her past and stuff.
Okay, good, cool. I would
Um,
I would be interested. I am actually interested. Um, and like I said, I really flew through the book. It was very fast
uh,
reading. Um,
all the books have been
and
like that so far.
yeah.
Um, Other tropes that I spotted was the false engagement, the one that's in this book it's less fake, but it's still kind of false because it doesn't end up going through and coming to fruition at the end. You have the
Yeah.
dead parent trope, the
Yeah.
cute one where you're just being, you and the love interest are just being yourself, but other people are like, "Are you a couple?" That happens in
Yeah.
like all sorts of romance things. It's so cute. There was the disguise trope where Jocelyn has to disguise herself like an old woman. I thought that was really
Yeah.
funny. Um, there's the magic sword that she gets towards the end. There's the it's a trap at the end. When they're
Mm.
trying to get back into the castle, and then also that very like true pure romance trope of love equals power up, where because you love
Yeah.
someone you're suddenly like all strong again.
Yeah.
um yeah, so those were like really fun to catch as I was reading.
Yeah, those are
And
good. You have a good eye for the tropes. Yeah, those are really good. Good
and
list.
then I have some quotes that I wanted to read about some of the relationships that we get in the book. Um, Going back to the love triangle, I thought it was interesting comparing what Edmund says to her versus what Alex says to her when they confess their feelings, because there's some similarities and differences there, but they're at like opposite ends of the book. Edmund's is at the beginning and Alex's is at the end, so it's kind of interesting to compare them. So Edmund says, "Because I've been in love with you ever since you first kicked my ass in training. You showed me what strength and determination truly
I'm on a
look like.
call. Sorry.
That's great. You inspired me, excited me, made me your willing slave." And then I compare that to what Alex says, which is, "As a girl, you captivated me with your courage and determination. You made me want to push myself to become a warrior worthy of fighting alongside you." And so this could just be me, but I feel like Edmund and Alex are seeing the same quality in her. Like they're both attracted to those same aspects about the main character, but Edmonds feels a little bit more like about how he's like enjoying watching her, and it seems like a little bit of a less equal relationship. Like he calls himself her slave, whereas Alex is more thinking about how she impacted him personally and how he wanted to fight alongside her and he had to push himself to like be worthy of that. And so that feels like a little bit more of an equal feelings relationship where he wants to fight alongside her instead of like being her slave or something like that. It just feels a little bit more comfortable and empowering and more romantic.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
um but yeah, I just thought it was interesting how similar those quotes were.
Yeah, and I agreed. I didn't actually think of that until you pointed it out, but yeah, I think it does show. I think we knew kind of throughout that Alex was the right
Uh,
choice, but I think it does show right away when you compare those two speeches, you can see straight away who is more compatible with Jocelyn
uh-huh.
and what's kind of, at least I think, yeah, I think it's a clear choice without, like I said, throwing Edmund under the bus and being like, oh,
Uh-huh.
actually he's creepy or actually he's bad. Um, so, they're both good, but there's one that's just kind of a clear,
Mm.
better one, but in this like subtle
It's not
way,
like he like like you're saying, like it would be different if like Edmund's like, "Oh, I like you because you're hot," or something like that.
Yeah,
Like they're both seeing the same things in her, which makes his love for her, even though it's not the same, still valid, and so
yeah,
it still makes Edmund a likable character. Um,
yeah, yeah.
And then I also wanted to talk a little bit more about Jocelyn and her connection with Kella, the wildcat. I When I was reading the book, like I loved that little voice in Jocelyn's head that was Kella the whole time. And like I need this voice in my head. Cause she says things like, "You are not weak, you're a warrior. Now get off the ground and prove it." And later on in the story, she says, "So you lost, so what? No one ever said you had to be undefeated. You have the heart of a warrior." Like just like I feel like we all need like this voice in our head.
Yeah, true, true.
And I liked that towards the end, a lot of like the build up to the finale was Jocelyn kind of confronting herself and like building that connection with Kella. I liked that it was introspective more than just like, oh, I've got to like learn how to do this new thing or whatever. It was more like working on herself.
Yeah.
Um, and I also at the end we get a literal Deus ex machina, which is not how you
Yeah.
usually get that trope. How did you
Yeah.
feel about that?
I was actually gonna say the ending, I was kind of like, "Wait, what?" But yeah, I don't know. I mean, yeah, it's hard because there's a part of me that's kind of like, "What?" Like, "Wait, what?" You know? And then there's
Uh,
another part of me that's like, um, it wasn't bad because obviously we knew the characters who intervened. We knew them already,
yeah, it
and
was
we
set
kinda knew
up,
their
and it
story already. Yeah, it was set
yeah,
up. It didn't come out of completely out of nowhere. Um, and we'd already gotten a lot of scenes where Jocelyn had been fighting and had
uh,
won various fights and had,
uh,
triumphed over, like, like when she was kidnapped and things like that. So
uh,
it wasn't like, so she also got her chance to
uh,
shine, I guess. So it wasn't
uh,
like, "Oh, you're stealing her moment of glory," because I think
and
we already had a good
uh,
sense of what she could do and what she was capable of. So I wasn't
yeah.
that upset about it, but at the same time, it was kind of like, "Huh?"
Yeah. Yeah, and another like positive about how it was handled was the fact to me that like it seemed like the goddess can just like walk in and do it at any point. Like she needed the two Shendries to be able to power up and do what she did. So that made
Yeah.
it a little bit less like it had to happen at that moment, and like she could have just like solved everything from the beginning, which is kind of an annoying
Yeah.
thing with other Deus Ex Machina. And also um that trope isn't my favorite thing because there's usually like a better way to do things, but at the same time I had to give the book props for making it a literal one where it's a
Yeah.
literal god. Like I just thought that was like amusing. Like I couldn't hate it because I just thought that was so like funny because I've
Just
never
right
seen
on the
that
nose,
really
yeah.
before.
And I
So
think yeah, and I think also I do like that the goddess does have, um, restrictions, obviously, because
uh-huh,
she's, like, fallen from her full goddessness,
uh-huh,
so she's, like, has restrictions, and then, again, the restrictions were clear. So, yeah, so I thought it wasn't the worst way to do it.
uh-huh,
I don't think it was maybe the conclusion that I would be like, "Oh,
mm,
that was really memorable," and that was just, it really brought everything together and changed the whole story and
uh,
blew my mind, like, definitely not that level, but at the
uh,
same time, um, it wasn't poorly done, like, I think it was
yeah,
done in a good way, a decent way,
uh-huh.
but yeah,
And
so
I I did find it really interesting how they played the mythology as like actual like history and stuff. Like the goddesses are real and stuff. I think that that's kind of fun because I feel like other fantasies play them more like is the gods that they worship real or not, like you don't really know, and that can be
yeah.
like fun in and of itself, but it just felt like kind of some variety. um
Yeah, and like I said, I felt the goddess also had some flaws and kind of
uh-huh,
had a strength but also weaknesses, and so
uh-huh,
it wasn't just like an all-powerful goddess who'd come in and saved the day. There was
uh-huh,
like I don't know, it didn't feel like that. It felt um a little bit more like I could almost root for the goddess because,
uh-huh.
you could see her as a real person or as a real character.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so I guess, like, mixed feelings about it. I wouldn't say it was my favorite ending,
uh,
but, um, yeah, but it's I don't know. Yeah.
uh,
But, yeah, it's just kind of a weird
and
one.
And then when it comes to the resolution of the romantic storyline, we had a really I like this cool exchange between Alex and Jocelyn while he after he got hurt, where she says, "I should have chosen love. I should have chosen you," and Alex says, "I shouldn't have taken so long to give you a reason to." I thought that was kind of a nice statement of what went wrong in that relationship up to that point. Uh,
Yeah.
and I thought it
Yeah.
was cute how Jocelyn proposes to him, where she's like, "Oh, there's gonna be a wedding." And he's like, "A wedding? You're still gonna marry Edmund?" And she's like, "You were planning on marrying me, right?" And just kind of like that whole like miscommunication thing. I thought that was really fun.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I will be honest, I didn't really like Alex as a character.
Uh,
I just felt he was a bit meh. And I
yeah.
felt his main personality trait was being in love with Jocelyn. And then,
Uh,
like obviously the duty and things like that. But I just um yeah,
I think.
I feel that happens a lot
Uh,
with romance books
uh-huh.
and a lot with YA books is that yeah,
Mhm.
that you have the dual POV where you have the female character who's the
Uh-huh.
lead and then you have the male character and the male character is basically just there to talk about how much he loves the female and how
Uh-huh.
awesome she is so you can like build up your female character through his
Uh-huh.
POV basically.
Uh-huh.
Because she can't say, "Oh, I'm so beautiful," but you can have
Yeah.
the male character say, like, "Oh, she looks amazing. She looks so beautiful." So I
Oh.
think that that happens a lot where the male characters are, and most readers, let's be honest, most readers are women. And
Mm.
I read a statistic somewhere, so I don't know where. So definitely Google this before you repeat it. Don't be like me. But I heard that like 80% of literary fiction is read by women, and
Mm.
that's just across the board. And then obviously in YA fantasy, it's going to be mostly teenage girls who are reading this
Uh,
book. So I think, the goal is not to have them connect with the male characters, is have them
mm.
connect with the female lead, which makes
Uh-huh.
sense because that's, who you're following through the journey and who you identify with. But I just feel like a lot of the male characters in YA and also in just romance books are literally just there to be hot, to look at the female character lead and like, be her
Uh,
love interest and, gush about how much they love her. And then just
uh-huh.
that's it. That's their whole personality, their
Something
whole journey.
that I wish that we could have gotten in the book that I think would have helped with that is there's kind of a nice little moment in the middle of the book when they're joined up with the Kalo family that are kind of like the Roma of our world. And and like they find out that Alex's family knew this family that it's the dad of the Kayla family is Hiram, and he says that his wife basically grew up with Alex's mom, and
Yeah,
so
that's why they like let them in or like they
yeah.
took them in after they were running through the forest.
And so I wish that we could have gotten maybe more with that, with Alex kind of having more of a personal identity reckoning and like connecting
Yeah.
back to his culture. I think
Yeah,
that they could have
I
expanded
thought that was
that.
definitely where that was headed. I thought it
Uh,
was like going to have to choose if he wants to continue to work at the
uh,
palace and to be her bodyguard, or if he was
uh,
going to have to choose if he wanted to, I don't know, rediscover his roots or have something like that happen. But
mm,
it didn't obviously that didn't
uh,
happen at all. And it was
yeah.
barely, I just thought that was also a bit strange that it was barely mentioned and it
Mm,
barely touched into how he felt about maybe, meeting these people who had known his dead
uh,
parents and or wondering what his life would have been like, or
mm,
I don't know. I don't
uh,
know exactly what I would have wanted to see from that, but it just felt that there
yeah.
was something that Alex could have had his own
Mm. Art.
personal growth or arc or
Yeah.
something, or at least like a little bit more something or other, but it
Uh,
was just very like I'm obsessed with Jocelyn. And I
uh,
think there were a few kind of moments. I think that's why I started not liking him too much, is because it was a few moments of like, I'm obsessed with her, and it just was kind of like, oh my gosh, like now I can't remember because I should have. I wish I had a physical copy and actually like wrote
uh,
notes. So I may have to start doing that in the future because I can't remember now. And on
uh,
Kindle, if you read it and then you can never find that page again. It's gone.
uh.
Like you can't like flick back. I've never been able to find something again. So I think, but there were like a few instances where Alex was just a little bit laying it
Too
on a
much.
little bit too
Yeah.
thick. Yeah, where I was just
Uh,
like, ooh, this is a bit creepy. Like this is too much. And then I think the fact that he didn't have anything else going on really, like we didn't see any of
mhm,
his friends. He wasn't really interested in
mhm,
learning about his family history or connecting with the Kylo culture. It was like very focused on
mhm,
Jocelyn. And so I felt, and then when he did say something that was a little bit borderline, like where it was a little bit
mhm,
too strong, I think if they had these other things and then they said the strong thing, you'd be like, okay, that's like,
mhm.
oh, he's like more interested in her than these other things. But it was like Alex has literally nothing else, and then he has a lot
Mhm.
of obsession for Jocelyn, and
Yeah.
it's just like it just felt a bit wonky. So I think that's what
Uh-huh.
kind of turned me off. Where I was just like, I don't know. Um, but yeah, but then again, obviously with the pacing and everything, if you want to keep it fast, you don't want to go on too
Mm.
many tangents and things like that. So you want to like keep it
It
streamlined.
it's
So
maybe also kind of an inverse to the whole, there's that trope or whatever, what have you, where like the female main character is left kind of bland so that you can kind of project your like personality onto them. And maybe with this,
yeah.
like the love interest is kind of bland in the sense that you can project, whatever kind of personality you like onto him.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, yeah, the kind of stoic, dutiful
Mhm.
character, love interest character, I think,
That's a huge trope, yeah.
yeah, exactly. And you kind of have a sense of what that character is like. He's like stoic and he's
Uh,
strong, but he has a weakness and it's only for you, like that kind of feeling. So I think that he serves that purpose well, but I wouldn't say he was like I feel there was more that could have been done with
Mhm.
him. That kind of wasn't done. But I still obviously I saw what she was doing with bringing Jocelyn and Alex together. Like I still think they were suited for each other, and I'm
Yeah.
glad they got together. And I did feel the warm and fuzzies when they got together at the end. So
Uh-huh.
um, yeah, so I think it was ultimately just think yeah, there was just a few of those like little
Uh,
things. Um,
for me, I think a lot of the warm and fuzzies come from the flashbacks that we get because like seeing them as like innocent like teenagers and stuff having like this puppy love with each other, I think is like really sweet. And I think that kind of informed like my opinion of it, even though Alex was kind of bland. Um,
yeah,
Another thing that I ended up really liking about the book was Lily. I think the connection between Lily and Jocelyn was nice, and I like that they're very different kinds of women. Jocelyn is, like you said, very much like take charge, kind of, empowered MC. But Lily is more gentle and mysterious and softer, but she also plays an important role in the big like ending, the big finale. Um, and then of course we get the second book that's just about Lily. And I thought that was pretty nice. I liked that all of the different Kalo daughters were different, um and I really was excited to read the next one because I wanted to learn more about Lily in particular.
yeah, exactly. And I agree with that as well with Lily being different than Jocelyn. I felt that Jocelyn was very much the kind of the stereotypical, especially these
Mhm.
days, stereotypical YA fantasy MC, where she's, yeah, it's all about being the girl boss. You don't need no man. And like,
Mm,
she's a princess and, everything's going so well until, oh no, she has to marry someone. And then, but she's also a warrior because she also is like practicing and all the boys say she can't do it, but she can do it. And so I just felt like Jocelyn's more of that kind of stereotypical character, which
Uh-huh.
I don't dislike, but I do feel it's kind of, especially these days, it's just a lot of
Mhm.
them have that
Mhm.
same kind of thing. Whereas I did feel like Lily was different, and I liked
Mhm.
that she had magical powers as well and also contributed to the plot and also connected with Jocelyn. So I think that, without having read any of the sequels, I can kind of imagine that if Lily's the main character in the next one, that you get to see a different type of MC. And I
Mhm.
can also see why you lead with Jocelyn, because she's more of like a known character to people. She's more familiar. And
Mhm.
so readers will instantly know, okay, this is what this character is about. And they can just jump into the story. And then in the sequel, they'll already kind of have a sense of Lily and
Mhm.
um, be able to follow her story along. So I can see why she did it in the way that she did it.
Uh-huh.
So I can't really fault that. I think, yeah, I think, like you say, it's just like Lily was very intriguing.
Uh-huh. And then at the end of the book, we get an epilogue. Um, what's your general stance on like prologues and epilogues, like in general?
I think so. Prologues, I think, are a bit different because you're getting
Mm-hmm.
into the story. And I
Mm-hmm.
think, as a writer, the big advice is never have a
Uh,
prologue. Um, so I think there's that. But then as a reader, I don't really like prologues, to be honest, because I feel, again, it's kind of it can also, it not always, sometimes it's used effectively, but a lot of times it can be used as a crutch
uh-huh.
where the writer doesn't know how to put the world building in, or they're starting
Mm-hmm.
from the wrong place if they slap a prologue
Mm-hmm.
on. And so I've read some bad prologues, so I think it's kind of soured me on prologues.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that's my opinion about prologues. But then I feel with epilogues, I think you can just throw one on, because if
Mm-hmm.
you're like really interested as a reader, you can keep reading. But
Uh-huh.
if you're kind of like, oh yeah, I'm good, then you can just stop. So I feel epilogues, you can be a bit more laid back.
Uh-huh.
Um, yeah, because I've written an epilogue for a really big, like a
Uh-huh.
three-part, really massive series, and I wrote the epilogue, and I was just like, I had so much time with these characters, and it was like a 4-chapter long epilogue. It's like,
Uh-huh.
I think it's like 10,000 words, and I was like,
Uh-huh.
oh, I need to write all of this, and then I had some beta readers who were like, yeah, you need to cut at least 75% out of that. And I was like, well, they can read it if they want, but I think, I don't know. Like, yeah, so I
Uh-huh.
think that, like, yeah, it's like epilogues, I think, are a little bit more like flexible, whereas I think prologues sometimes, I feel I have a more negative opinion of prologues, I think. I don't know.
I
How
feel like
about you?
there's three different kinds of epilogue. There's the epilogue where everything is perfect and happy. Look at them.
Yeah.
And then there's the epilogue that's like, let's tie up some loose ends and give you kind of a little bit more, stuff to digest. And then there's the one that's like pointing you towards like the sequel, which this is more like the
Yeah.
third kind, whereas it's kind of trying to tease you into reading the next one. And I thought it was successful because I immediately went to the next book after reading. um,
Yeah.
but prologues are definitely a different story. Um, it really just depends on the book for me. Sometimes I like them, sometimes I don't, and then sometimes you read Eye of the World and there's two of them. So
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I can see why they can be useful, but I just think, yeah, I just think anything that can be used as a crutch for lazy
uh,
writing
uh-huh.
probably will be abused, you know? And then it's kind of the people who abuse it who ruin
Uh,
it for the rest of like,
and I
for
feel
everyone
like the
else.
percentage of people who like I'm not one of those people. If there's a prologue, I will read it. But I know way too many people who, if there's a prologue, they're skipping over that. They're not spending any time on it. And so
Yeah. I'd
if
probably
there's
skip
like
I might skip it, but I'm not gonna get too invested in it. I'll probably skip it, to be honest. I
yeah,
don't have
and
enough
so like
time for that.
yeah, so like that percentage is really high. So if that percentage of people isn't getting like the full story, then you need to find a different way to get that information in?
Yeah, that's how I felt. I felt it has to be you have to work it into the text of the
Uh,
story and make it feel natural within the
uh,
story. I also kind of feel that way about maps. I mean, I like the aesthetics of them, but I
uh,
think that you also need to work the geography into the story so it feels
mm,
really natural and it feels like people know where places are and
uh,
have a sense of those places without needing to rely on the map. Like the map can be a
mm,
bonus, but it shouldn't be the main way of conveying that information because I think
uh,
again it can be used as a crutch
uh,
and you know so yeah, so I kind of feel that way about maps as well, but I like them because they're pretty and I like
mm,
them as a supplement, so if you're already getting that information and then you want
uh,
to look at it in a different format, then that's kind of fine. But I feel there's a lot of writers, at least like amateur writers, who will use the map as a crutch to
uh.
not make things make sense in the actual narrative.
Speaking of maps, I do have to give the author props that the map for this story isn't just another copy paste UK. So
I
there's way
actually
too many
haven't
books
I
that are
didn't
that.
see the map. I don't know if I on my Kindle version, maybe it was I don't know. I didn't see it.
Yeah,
I
it's
don't
like
know
the
where it
first
was.
page. Yeah. I'm somebody who I
Yeah.
always look back at the map, so I'm always like constantly looking back just because I'm like I have trouble like sticking it in my head and I'm always like trying to like give myself context for what I'm reading. But I totally understand your take that like maps shouldn't be necessary because if that's the only way to convey where things are happening, that does get really tiresome. I know personally from having to go back and forth so much in like anything I read. But yeah, it's a pretty like solid map and it doesn't look cookie cutter. I mean, it's very simple, but it's not like it doesn't look a derivative, which is nice because I feel like so many fantasies, especially these days, are just like the UK but like fancied up. Like Westeros is basically like a giant like England, and I think there's other books too that are like popular today that do the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think yeah. Well, I wish I'd looked at the map so I can have a more coherent opinion on this one, but I'll have to go back and look.
Yeah. So next up is Darling, There Are Wolves in the Woods. I'm about halfway through it so far. I'm excited to keep reading. I'm really curious how things are gonna go down.
Yeah, I'm about halfway through it as well. I guess that I try not to read descriptions and reviews before I start
uh,
reading because I think it just sours my opinion too much.
uh,
But is it actually meant to be YA or is it NA or
I
is it
I think it's
adult?
more new adult.
Okay.
The main character is in college, and there's some
Oh yeah,
spiciness
she's in
there,
her
and so
20s.
I think it's more
Yeah,
new
because
adult.
she's
Yeah,
drinking at one point.
yeah,
I think it mentions she's like 21 or something.
yeah. I think it's something like
Okay.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, because obviously it's a lot slower paced than the YA fantasy,
Uh
but
huh.
but I'm fine with that because the YA fantasy um was it was very fast paced. It felt very much like YA, but I'm not like someone who wants to be reading YA all the time, so
Uh
it is
huh.
a nice like change of pace. And it's a
Yeah.
lot different than Marked Princess. It definitely has a different vibe,
Yeah.
different writing style.
And
It's like
the mythology of it is really fun because the fae are portrayed, I feel like, more true to like the more original myths and stuff and lore with that instead of like as like little like Tinkerbells. So
yeah. Well, I don't know. There's actually a lot of that I've been doing because I've been doing folklore research for my next book. And there is a lot of diversity within fairy lore.
that's
And a
true.
lot of them don't actually, I mean, a lot of them don't have wings. A lot of them are just
Yeah.
small
Creatures, yeah.
creatures that kind of help you with various tasks. And then if you offend them or, yeah, offend them, I guess, then they'll
Uh
like ruin your life. And then, yeah, but I think, yeah, but there's actually, and then there are like evil fairies, kind of
uh
where they're more like woodland
uh
creature type things. So
well, and there's
there's a
the
big diversity, but I think I think one thing is that, and I kind of missed this trend, was the whole trend with Sarah J. Maas
Oh,
and the
uh-huh.
court of this and that.
Yeah.
So I feel that some of the Fae characters are more like that, or in that
Mhm.
vein, maybe like an interpretation of that kind of where they're just like sexy people.
Uh, what I liked about, the myth of this is that, that the Fae creatures are portrayed as, like, sinister. Are you there, Inez? Um, that a lot of time Fae are portrayed, like I said, like Tinkerbells, but, in a lot of the myths, they're, psychologically, like, terrifying and, manipulative, and so I feel like that's present in the story, which makes it really interesting. Um, but yeah, thank you for joining us. We had a really great time with this discussion, and tune in next month for our discussion of Darling There Are Wolves in the Woods. Um, Thank you for joining us, and I will see you in a few weeks.